Hello everyone and welcome to the Barrens Chat podcast. I'm Sod and with me tonight is my co-host Guck. This is a podcast about World of Warcraft by two guys who play it. Guck, beta watch / wait continues for you and myself. Not AQ40 has been cleared. World First went to Onslaught. How was your week gaming wise? It was a pretty good push week for Mythic Plus. What'd you play and how did the keys go?
I think this week marks potentially the end of beta watch. I don't think we're ever going to get it. I think at this point, as podcasters who haven't been given a response from the community managers that we've messaged, and we haven't gotten any nods on Twitter or anything, I think it's pretty safe to say that if as podcasters we're not getting the nod, we're probably not going to get the nod as just regular players. So the beta dreams, getting actual Shadowlands content out to you guys is, I think, gone. I don't think there's a chance of that happening, which is good because at this point, I don't know what else is left. I think that they've done basically everything that they can do in Shadowlands beta. This last week, we got to see a lot of testing stuff. We got to see almost all of the fights. We haven't seen, Sire Denathrius, the last boss yet, but we've seen his boss room in the introduction. So we've seen a lot of cool stuff, but unfortunately, I don't think we will ever be bringing that direct to you guys.
Yeah, pretty unfortunate stuff. It also was pretty much the last official push your key week of BfA. Obviously, it's still possible to push keys going forward, but I think the affixes lineup, this was probably the last good one that you're going to get if you really want to shove your IO. I attempted a 22 siege this week, didn't go as planned, and I way to restart it and depleted the 21 by about 3 minutes. So that's probably the last difficult high key that I will do on my Hunter, which is a character that I hate playing, but it's meta right now, so I play it, and pretty much retiring from any sort of difficult content that Battle for Azeroth has to offer, and I'm pretty much in maintenance mode going forward through this expansion.
Yeah, I agree. I came back with a idea of what I wanted to do, and I got to that point pretty quickly. We're at a point now where, like you said, you can kind of go one of two ways. You can continue to try and push your IO, which is just trying harder and harder keys as you get more and more echoes and can more and more perfect your corruption. It's largely basically diving into patch 8.3, and I personally don't enjoy patch 8.3 that much to do that. I mean, it's great, it's fun, cool, your numbers are big, and the pulls are massive, and everyone is pumping, and even the tank is pumping, and it's a little bit much when you break down what's actually going on. And you have to think, how much of this damage is player output and how much of this damage is just random procs based on your gear. And at the end of the day, I mean, there are different philosophies about this. Some people would probably say, at the end of the day, it does not matter. I geared my tune to make the most output, and that's what matters. Or there are people who think that, it should just largely revolve around my rotation and how well I'm executing my class. Either way, I think what matters most about getting stuff out of BfA right now, what matters most for anyone, no matter how you think about it, if you intend to play patch 8.3, maybe it matters a little bit less, because that's kind of just, you need to play patch 8.3 in order to play it, which is kind of weird. You have to engage in the systems to get echoes, to get corruption. But for everything else, I think the best thing right now would be to exploit the systems in place in patch 8.3 to set yourself up for success in Shadowlands. I don't think you really benefit at all at this point pushing your IO beyond 2 point whatever K, just because when you go into the area of the people who are pushing their IO, if you're not already up there, you will perpetually be catching up, And when people list their groups for keys, unless you're in a group of 5 people who are very consistently running keys to push higher and higher numbers, you're not going to get in, because people very rarely bring a pug who has a lower IO score than they have. So you're perpetually going to be behind, and it's going to be harder for you to get into the high key groups than the people who already have the IO that won't really benefit from the number of keys that you need. So I think that's a pretty short-sighted goal. I think the best thing you can do is really, really rehearse and learn and practice the plus 15 to plus 17 range and just that narrow bracket, so that you can specifically sell keys and gear yourself just around that point. Because what you're going to find when you look for how to itemize and really maximize your character right now in BfA 8.3, there's going to be conflicting information. There's going to be stuff that shows you how to make it through the highest challenge keys, and if you're looking for just the top performer at your class, that's what they're doing right now. They're doing the strats, and they're gearing in a way that is made for these really high, 29, 28 keys. That isn't necessarily the best way to go through the 15 through 17 keys, because at 15 through 17, the expected damage that the DPS are taking isn't as much. And you don't need, essentially what you'll see, the meta is you stack a lot of verse in high keys so that the healer doesn't have to heal you as much through the kind of standard damage. In low keys, relatively low keys, these are still high keys for some people, 15 to 17s, it is more important that you're dealing maximum damage and getting through quickly so that you can get to a point where, as 4 people, the DPS and the tank are putting out enough to make it through at a +2 timer. So that can be used then to sell keys. You can make gold instead of getting just IO. You're getting something that will last beyond patch 8.3 and into Shadowlands in that tangible gold. So I would say for everyone, they should, if you're listening to this and you are playing patch 8.3, I personally, if I were you, I would abandon the IO push and switch over to just trying to sell keys.
Yeah, I mean, other than, like, we did a couple sales this weekend, and, like, other than that, like, I did push this week, but I'm pretty much transmog farming. Like, you and I ran a couple mythic Jaina pugs that, we killed her twice, and then on the third go-round with other alts, the group wasn't as effective. So it's a pretty easy boss to pug, and if you want a 10% chance at getting your mount, it's really not difficult. I mean, the groups fill up somewhat quick. It can be frustrating, if you wipe a couple times, but if you stick with it, maybe you get the mount for free. I know a lot of guilds and communities are still selling it, but if you're one of those people that is, nervous about social interaction with other people and WoW, I mean, these guilds aren't, not guilds, these groups aren't requiring Discord. It's a doable raid boss, and you can get a cool mount out of it, and it's something I would encourage a lot of people to do for the rest of BfA until they get them out, because it's a really cool mount. It's definitely one that I wouldn't mind having in my collection. I'm starting to do those mount runs now, and I never get them done when they're in the present expansion, so I really just have to wait for all these mounts to drop, and it's definitely not enjoyable trying to farm them all.
Yeah, speaking of mount runs, it kind of, the Jaina mount run is something that you really do want to take advantage of now, right? Because 2 drop for 20 people, and that's only a BfA thing. Also, it's very easy to get into these groups. Like Sod said, you don't need to get in Discord. It's just a cheese strat. Take your interrupt off your bar and go clap Jaina during her intermission phase thing. It's a good thing to do. Also, because I don't think there's much else you can do. For me, I've already gotten everything I need out of Heroic in a month. I've already gotten everything I need out of Mythic because I'm only doing the first 3 of Mythic and I don't want to commit to progression. So, that's already fine. And outside of that, I don't have much left. So doing the Jaina mount every week on a couple characters, why not? It doesn't take very much time at all, and you just kind of get it done. That also inspired me, Sod, for something else that we should try to do in the coming weeks, because it is kind of maintenance mode. We should try to do the meta achievements to get the BfA mounts while it's still easy enough to maybe get groups interested in doing it. Just get a couple other guildies. Yeah, the dungeon meta achievements. Maybe go back and try to do raid meta achievements. I'm sure we could probably do like raid meta achievement pug groups and just like mandate that people sit and take it seriously and do the achievement, and we could probably get that mount too. But I haven't even looked at it. I don't know what they are for BfA. I've been so checked out of BfA. I don't know what it is. We can even go back and do the Legion one sometimes. But yeah, I mean, like we've pretty heavily switched into maintenance mode, and I think in the future, when we do give BfA updates, it's just going to be like, what mounts did we get? How much gold did we make off of selling keys? And that's kind of it. That's kind of all that BfA has for me right now.
Yeah, me too. And I think that the guild, I was boosting heroic raid clears with another guild on a different server that I was just fortunate enough to get involved with, and I think that that's going down as well. I mean, the price is going down, so it's like harder for me to commit because I'm not making as much gold, so I don't care about it anymore. Obviously, like with the Gallywix accusations and bans last week, it wasn't a Gallywix boosting community. So, and honestly too, I thought with that the price of the boost would go down, and they have stayed pretty much the exact same. Or I thought they would go up with the Gallywix going away because it's, some of the competition gone. But the prices have stayed the same. So good on the community and the people that are buying those, including myself. I've bought some as well. That you're not paying extra price for stuff like that.
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward, I think, with the BfA stuff, and we've hit that pretty hard. We don't normally go that heavy into BfA, but consider this kind of like our sign off. We are basically done. I raided. I was in a guild that got really close to cutting edge several times, but they couldn't do it in Eternal Palace, and I quit. And I came back to 8.3, and I got my character corrupted, and we're selling keys. Sod, you had a fairly similar journey where you were raiding and then you came out, but now you're back into it, and you were in a community that was raiding, but now you're on maintenance mode. So this is kind of like our farewell to BfA. We're done. No more war fronts, no more islands, no more Nathanos telling us what to do on a boat, no more Razan is a powerful Loa, no more BfA, no more Dolly and Dot. No more blood trolls in a swamp. No more Alliance war mode cheese nonsense. No more. BFA's done.
I've even stopped doing my emissaries, and a lot of people that don't play with me, I do those every day on like 2 or 3 characters, and it's honestly, I don't even mind doing it. So when I've stopped doing emissaries, that this expansion is pretty much dead for me.
Yeah. And that's the nail in the coffin. The next thing that we're going to talk about is pretty similar. And in my opinion, I think Classic is now stepping off of its last leg and is slowly fading into the graveyard, literally and figuratively, as we move out of the Phase 5 content bomb and we move immediately back into the content drought, where people are going to wait for what will turn out to be the final content drop in Classic, which will be Phase 6 and Naxxramas. We had a very exciting Phase 5 launch just in the kind of drama that came out of everything. There were the mass reports that led to automated bans. There was a ton of cross-faction collusion on different guilds, on different servers. There are different servers where certain guilds are sandbagging the war effort turn-in so that they can maximize the potential number of guildies that can get Scarab Lord. There was a lot of just craziness. Blizzard changing the way that Silithus works so that certain people, if you're not level 60, if you don't have a scepter, whatever it was, you'd be kicked out potentially. layering on big servers affecting how people collected fragments and ultimately determined the fastest route to getting those fragments for apes using 2 guilds on different layers. So there was a lot of just interesting stuff that was inherently classic, right? Like layers. That wasn't something that was a part of vanilla. And I think all in all, the fact that clearing AQ took Onslaught less than 40 minutes, and BWL took Apes less than 40 minutes, and Molten Core took Apes, I don't remember how long, but it was very quick, to the point that it made Method just kind of like wrap up their event and go home, because they thought they would do something crazy in Classic. I think that as a whole, Classic has lived its life. And Tuesday, when this episode goes live, all of the servers that weren't super hardcore, but were hardcore enough to finish their war effort, a lot of them are going to get their gong rung on Tuesday. There was going to be Scarab Lords. They won't have the title, but they'll have the mount. And most of those guilds are going to clear AQ this week. And next week on the 18th, the last round of people on the servers that weren't fast enough to do it, they'll get theirs. And the same thing will happen. But after that point, we're going to get to the drought, and there's going to be nothing. People are going to just be farming AQ the same way that we were farming BWL, and everyone's just waiting for Nax. That mindset requires someone who is just so in love with Classic, or they're so in love with the idea of getting to see Nax or whatever it is, that I don't think Classic as it is right now is going to have a big resurgence until, the massive announcement that will be Burning Crusade Classic. So I would say, as well as BfA, we're kind of saying goodbye to Classic a little bit. I mean, I personally don't know if I'm going to go back and play Classic until TBC comes out. I would love to go in there and run AQ because I've never run AQ. I would love to go back in there and run Nax because I've never run Nax. But me and Side were talking about this. It's like, how much time do I have to invest to get Nature Resist just to run the AQ raid? But then I get there and the AQ raid takes me 30 minutes. If I had to invest hours of time getting that gear, potentially, just to raid for 30 minutes, is that worth it? And then if I get to that raid, and it doesn't take 30 minutes because my guild is a little bit more casual, or they make mistakes, or there's just not the right pathing, people didn't do the right theory crafting, is that going to be worth it? That experience would be worse knowing that it can be done, expediently in 30 minutes. Either way, it's just hard to rationalize getting involved back into Classic, right? And Saad, I know you're fully checked out of Classic.
Yeah, I checked out kind of like the similar situation with what you said with AQ and like in Molten Core, like doing Ragnaros and very, very basic and elementary mechanics, and people couldn't figure them out. And I guess you could call me an elitist for that because it certainly frustrated me. But as somebody who, raids on a slightly above average tier, right? Like, I guess I don't know the player base numbers, but, I try to raid Mythic. I got 6 out of 12 bosses down in Iolotha. I got the 7th boss to 1%. So let's just say that that's slightly above average, right? And you were close to cutting edge in the Battle of Dazar'alor raid, so you're, way above average, right? So to just go back and see mechanics that are so simple and just the fact that they can't be executed, and I know that might come off as elitist, but it's frustrating, especially because those mechanics are like something that you would see in LFR, right? And the damage rotations for the most part are one button. So it's like, why am I wasting my time on this? And I guess that's kind of rude to say, but that's where I fell off on Classic. Both games right now, Classic and Battle for Azeroth, certainly still have a player base playing them, right? I mean, you and I are still playing. I'm not going to stop playing BfA. I don't think you're going to stop playing BfA. The amount of time I'm dedicating to it is definitely going down, which is fine, but like they still have like BFA is still very lively, trade chats active, and there's still a lot of people running keys. There's a lot of heroic groups going on, a lot of Mythic Jaina groups. So things are still going on. It's not like the expansion is dead. It's just any sort of progression or anything like that that we would want to do, and I think that a lot of people in Classic are probably going to do is just going to turn into raid logging and farm, right? I mean, really. I mean, I'm playing other games right now as well, so I think it's like the expansions are fine, but they've run their course, right?
Yeah, and I think with Classic, even though Naxxramas is coming, I feel like a lot of people are in the mindset where Classic has run its course. I'm gonna raid log through AQ into the point where I have a lot of gear, and at that point, it's going to be expected that you can just succeed in Naxxramas. Once you have AQ40 gear, you're going to be set. And after that point, what else are you doing? Are you farming Naxxramas gear just to raid log? And why? Why would you just do that? Like, I would understand, okay, maybe you're just like really committed to PvP and you're going to continue raid logging Naxxramas to continue getting gear, to continue pushing PvP. That actually has an end game in mind. And I think for most people who are really committed to Classic, they're committed largely. I think the people who are going to stay in it for the long haul, they're committed largely to that PvP system. I don't think the raiding is something that holds people. I would say it's a combination of your community and the PvP. But ultimately, once you have a community, why aren't you guys playing more fun games? Go play something else that's more fun. Especially if you guys are just raid logging, having fun in raid, but just raid logging. Like, go do something else. But yeah, we will be checking in again on Classic when Nax launches. I might, come back in at some point because I'll still have a WoW sub, so I can just sign on and, maybe see what's going on with AQ, get a couple runs in, but I don't think I'm going to feel like I missed out on it after it's gone. And that's the main thing, because I was doing this to try and experience something that I didn't get to experience. But once it's not available, I don't think I'm going to feel like I missed out, because I get it now. Like, I get the whole thing now.
Yeah, and honestly, like any sort of Classic gameplay that I'm going to have is going to wait to see how the Burning Crusade release is going to go, and if I have to level up a character or not. So when BC launches, if I get to transfer a max level character to a Burning Crusade realm, then maybe I'll prep up a character for that. But other than that, Classic is pretty much done for me unless I log on to just do a couple quests and then I log off, which is what I've been doing in Classic for like the last month or so. And with that, on to Shadowlands. Now, we've been very positive about Shadowlands on this podcast, and for very good reason, right? I mean, the game does look awesome, and but there are some things that I guess, not to be negative about, but like there's issues that maybe like we're not overly thrilled with, right? Like, just for example, the target cap changes, the Covenant issues, Master Loot, global cooldown, and the no tier in the first raid, and whether or not it's guaranteed for the second raid, which we think it is, but you and I aren't sure yet. Maybe there's been an announcement and we haven't missed it. My big issue right now with Shadowlands is Master Loot. I want to see Master Loot back in the game. I think it was a mistake removing it, and I think that maybe the devs took it out because they read too much of general forums and see people's bad experiences, right? I mean, a lot of memories that people have from anything or that, stay in their mind are bad experiences. I think Master Loot overall is a good system for guilds that utilize it correctly, right? And if there's a guild not utilizing it correctly, then that'll get like thrown around on the server and people will know, and maybe they won't join that guild. Like, I think for guilds, a full guild group, Master Loot should be a thing, because if you're a guild leader, a raid leader, a loot master, whatever you're doing, if you hand out a piece of gear with Master Loot, you are investing in that person that you're giving the gear to, right? So if you're going into a raid with personal loot on and something that drops for a trial person that, maybe isn't performing to how you'd like and maybe isn't having a good trial, or maybe is just going to leave your guild after they get a few pieces of loot, that's not a good investment for your guild, right? So your guild is a community working together to try to achieve a common goal, whether that's normal rating, ahead of the curve rating, or cutting edge rating. I think Master Loot should be in the game as long as you're in a full guild group. I understand why they don't want it in pugs, but in a full guild group that is rating and progressing together and wants to do well as a team, seeing somebody get an upgrade that they can't trade because it's useless stats, but it's a 10 item level upgrade over what they have equipped and they can't trade it, that is a bad system. That's bad loot design, and you need to put your faith back in the community and bring this back into the game.
We're not going to get beta. We're going to call it like it is. Blizzard is dumb. Blizzard is dumb for leaving these things in the game, leaving it as it is. And if they don't change it, you have an opportunity to change and fix these things every patch. And if they don't do it when the expansion starts, with a massive turnover like a new expansion, and the idea that if they don't change it then, that they might change it during a patch, is asinine. They're just not going to fix it. So these are things that we dislike and they should fix, and if they don't, they're dumb. Just straight up. Because it doesn't make sense. Master Loot as an option should exist as an option. But if what they didn't like is how people started to ninja Master Loot by quickly turning it on and not having an obvious notification, make an obvious notification. If they don't like how certain groups can abuse it, there's already a system in place where the game recognizes if 80% or whatever percentage of that group is in a guild, and it labels it as a guild group. That's how you can get guild achievements. So if that's something that's enabled, why not also allow them to choose Master Loot? And then you can double it up, put on both systems. Restrict Master Loot to guild groups that are recognized to be guild groups. Also send out a notification that is like a big pop-up on your screen that says, hey, loot has changed to Master Loot. And then you can go even one step further and say, loot has been changed to Master Loot. Accept or deny, and allow the group to vote on it, and everyone has to accept it in order for it to switch over from personal loot to Master Loot. And then boom, the system is fixed. If people consistently say no, the guild structure can be like, all right, well, we're a Master Loot guild and we're not going to allow you people to come in, and they'll be removed from the group. The people removed from the group still have their lockout. They can go run a personal loot group, and the Master Loot group can go do their Master Loot stuff and hand it out to the guild. It just doesn't make sense to remove the option entirely when it serves utility to the game and to guilds. It works. Master Loot is something that works as a system. What doesn't work is people exploiting that system. The fix of that is not removing the system. It is fixing the way to make exploiting harder. You want to make it harder for people to exploit others with this system. But sure, maybe Blizzard has gotten to a point, and this is something we'll never know. We've never gotten complaints. Blizzard registers so many complaints from so many users. Maybe they feel that it is actually better for them to just straight up remove the system because they've gotten so many complaints from it. And we'll never know that. But in my opinion, based on what I know and only what I know, I think that there are way better fixes to Master Loot.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, obviously the people with the loudest voices on social media are high-end raiders or people that have raided with their community for a long time. That's the outlier, and obviously they all want Master Loot back as well, but even smaller tier, more casual or average players like ourselves, a lot of us and a lot of the people that I've raided with also say they want Master Loot. I don't know anybody that goes into a progression raid and thinks that personal loot is a good idea. Unless there's somebody who's new to being into any sort of progression community, right? Maybe this is you have time on your hands. You're like, oh, cool. Maybe I'll try raiding with a guild on a schedule. And maybe you don't understand how that loot system works. So maybe you're a little skeptical about it. But I think most people that have been involved with the raid scene for any extended period of time probably think that master loot is the way to go. I mean, like with personal loot, like it's fine, everybody gets loot, and I think, sure, like for pugs, it's great. But like if you have a guy who's just filling in one night and he gets an item that's best in slot for one of your raiders that's there every night and he loots it and it's a 10 item level upgrade and he can't trade it because of that, like that's not fun for anybody. And even then, if you have to ask him to trade it, you still come off like an ass. Like, hey man, why don't you give that item to this person? Like, that's not fun. I guess you could establish loot rules ahead of time, but really nobody wants to tell somebody like, oh, hey, you see that awesome ring you just got? Why don't you go give it to this person? Like,
it creates a feeling where the player who has to trade the loot based on the guild's needs feels like they are being punished, like they are losing something just because they were the ones randomly assorted that item. And, depending on how you think about it, their level of deservedness over that item varies depending on if, the guild worked for it, individuals in the guild worked for it, how much did that person work for it, and, it's just randomly assorted to them. I think, yeah, you've got some good takes on master loot. There are other systems and things that we have written down that we're critical of, but they have been really just kind of beaten dead by a lot of other people. Issues with covenants, we share a lot of the problems that Preach has, where, if I'm a Death Knight of the Venthyr Covenant and I see someone who's Necrolords, I see that they're doing something cool, I can't just do what they're doing because I have to be so invested in a certain covenant. And I can't, if I switch out of that covenant, I can't switch back unless it's something that requires like a weekly reset or something that we don't know yet. But it seems to be that even though it's easy to switch, it's very hard to switch back. And if you want to do a covenant for raiding and then another covenant for something else, it doesn't seem like you can. But obviously Preach and a lot of other people have beaten that one to death. The GCD has not been fixed. There is still an abundance of stuff on the GCD that probably shouldn't be. That's still going live into Shadowlands. Again, another thing that big time community of people have made a big deal about. I think we've already mentioned this too. No tier guaranteed in the first raid. Is it guaranteed in the second raid? Let us know if you have seen a blue post about it, because I can't remember one. Tier is a massive issue that needs to be a part of raiding. It was a huge mistake to not have it be a part of BfA, and it should always be a part of raiding. But the last thing that we can talk about before we end off the episode is what I think was the biggest kind of controversy in Shadowlands that I think is fair to be critical of. The target cap changes. Sod, why do you think Blizzard is implementing these target cap changes?
Honestly, I think part of the reason that those target caps are in, potentially, is just due to MDI, like MDI balance and like Mythic Dungeon balance, right? Because a lot of the classes that you don't see in the MDI or like, I guess like they make their way into high keys is casters, right? Like like they have to take time, they have to move, they can't cast, they lose DPS. You see an incredible amount of melee. This is my opinion, and I'm literally just guessing. So, but you see an incredible amount of melee. At least you did early on in Legion, and a lot in the first couple seasons of Battle for Azeroth. You didn't see any ranged. It was rogues, Death Knights, Windwalker monks. I mean, those were pretty much the comps. And maybe like a warlock would sneak in there, or like a mage, but like for the most part they weren't there. So I think potentially that this is going in because of Mythic Plus to potentially slow the groups down, right? If you can only hit 4 or 5 targets, it doesn't affect the class that I want to main right now in Shadowlands, so I'm not overly upset about it. But if I had to guess, this is why I would say the target cap is going in there. I kind of understand maybe why they're putting it in, but I don't have any issues with no target cap. I think, honestly, not having a target cap is fine and balance. And target capping really just makes it harder to balance classes in 5-man dungeons, right?
Yeah, I don't. That's the thing with Shadowlands that I also have a big meta criticism of is with all of these systems and all of these options and all of these possible combinations, how is it even conceivable that things will be balanced? There's just no way that there will be clear balance in Shadowlands. There will be specific things that are better than others no matter what. We've got 4 covenants. Each covenant has 3 soulbinds, so there's 12 combinations. There are different conduits that you can put in. There's the different talents that you can choose for your spec. All of these things just make it impossible to be balanced when you think about how they function with each other in combination. So, balance is going to be out the window. I think now you add on target cap changes, you're balancing in certain situations now where it's okay, how do these guys work in less than 5 targets? How do these guys work in more than 5 targets? How do they work against 1 target? I think it's going to add more problems than it solves. And I think at the middle to upper end where we play, I don't think it's going to result in anything net positive. Except for what you mentioned, which is a cool perspective that I don't have, which is that more ranged specs that don't get as much play in BfA will potentially be getting more play in the Mythic Dungeon scene in Shadowlands. And I think that is ultimately a very good thing that could happen. I am so tired of seeing MDI where all the teams are the same. I would love to see different specs coming in to change the meta of that group so that the entire group functions differently. But they're still, pushing the same difficulty key and doing it just differently based on the classes they have. I would love to see that. I just don't think it fixes much besides making the game slower. And I like to play the game fast, right? Blizzard's thinking you pull too many mobs. If you kill them really quickly with target uncapped damage, then the tank doesn't suffer the damage penalty from pulling that many mobs, and you guys go a lot faster. So instead of curbing that with some other means, they're basically just nerfing the DPS. They could buff the damage, they could implement affixes that, maybe they act like a bolstering, but instead of when the mob dies, it starts going off kind of over time. So you're incentivized to maybe every 10 seconds a bolster goes off. And if you've pulled a lot of ads, they bolster immediately. And then it's just like these stacking bolsters that go up that would incentivize you to kill smaller packs faster. There are just ways around it, but ultimately it slows the game down, and I don't like that. I like to play fast. I like to play, big pulls, big damage. Let's go quickly. Let's push the timer. Let's go risky. And it's a risk-reward thing that you have to measure. Now it's like, well, there's risk, but no reward. So, you just don't do it. The risk-reward balance earlier is way more fun, and now it's just like, hey, there's no reward, so why risk it?
Yeah, and honestly, the borrowed power situation that we've had going on in the last 2 expansions with the artifact weapons in Legion, the Azerite, and now Essences and Battle for Azeroth, and Corruption, and now with the Covenants and Soulbinds and Conduits and Shadowlands. I feel like as developers, they're making it incredibly hard on themselves to transition from expansion to expansion. And I don't know. I'm not overly fond of the borrowed power system that goes away in the expansion. And don't take this the wrong way. I want to get rid of my Heart of Azeroth as soon as possible. I hate that thing. I hate artifact power. I liked my Legion artifact, but I hated grinding the AP for it. I'm not fond of these borrowed power systems that are incredibly difficult for them as a development team to balance. And I'd rather see, if you're going to make a change that's going to affect my class, just rework my class. Don't put all these borrowed power systems into my character. I don't need that. I'd much rather see just my class get reworked, and that changes it.
Ain't that the truth? Preach it. Anything else you want to add before we end up this jam-packed episode? We hit heavy on BfA Classic and Shadowlands. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I do have one massive complaint that I'm actually very upset about. At the end of the episode last week, I told everybody to go grind Comp Stomp, and we recorded it on Tuesday. Literally, I did one Comp Stomp, and they took it off, and it's not going to be seen again until Shadowlands. So damn you, Blizzard, for making me a liar. I'm sorry to anybody that wanted to farm or grind Blood of the Enemy last week. Terrible defeat for anybody trying to grind that essence. Really feel bad for everyone from the bottom of my heart, and Blizzard for making me a liar. Other than that, thanks for listening.
Yep, it seems like they wanted to deprive us of beta and then embarrass us by making us wrong publicly. Thanks, Blizzard. Love you guys. Thanks to everyone who listened. We appreciate it as always. Rate and review us on Apple Podcast. That's the app. You can hit us up on Twitter at Barrens Chat Pod, at Saudi LOL, at Guckyman. You can hit us up on our website for the other contact info. That's barrenschat.podbean.com. And we will see you guys in the next one.